We are not alone. We have never been alone.
Everyone is a star. Every mountain, every drop in the ocean, every living creature is made from space dust. Hundreds of tons of space dust fall on planet Earth every day. When we look at the stars, we are looking at the material which we are all made of. There are millions of galaxies in the universe, and each galaxy contains billions of stars. Many of the stars have planets. Since the dawn of mankind, the elite have lied to us. Knowledge of space was knowledge of power over mankind. By watching the stars and planets, the elite knew when the seasons would come, when the moon would eclipse the sun, when the tides would ebb and flow, when the summer would start and winter would end. Watching the sky made you wise and powerful. When the first telescopes were invented, the elite suppressed their existence and imprisoned anyone who wanted to bring knowledge of the infinite universe to mankind. The first grand lie was that planet Earth was flat. The next lie was that no other intelligent beings live in the universe. We now know that all this is lies. The most important truth is that the universe is like the ocean. It is teeming with life. Life will get a grip wherever it can. Life will evolve into any form and shape it can. Through all the centuries of lies, remember this. Your ancestors gave us a warning that mankind has been invaded by aliens many times in the past.
Let's look at where some NASA scientists came from. Peenemünde, Nazi Germany. For centuries, warmongering nations had been using primitive rockets as a weapon of war. China, Britain, and of course Hitler's Third Reich all used rockets to terrorize their enemies. Werner von Braun was an SS officer and rocket scientist. his team at Peenemünde designed the first cruise missile, the V-1 Doodlebug. The V-2 rocket was the forerunner to the Saturn V rocket, which would supposedly take man to the moon. At the end of World War II, the American government were desperate to get hold of the Nazi rocket weapons, which had wrought havoc on the innocent people of Britain. The American government launched Project Paperclip, which secretly changed the war criminal files on Werner von Braun and his colleagues. Files which described these SS officers as an ardent Nazi were changed to read not an ardent Nazi. Werner von Braun, his team and the rocket factory at Peenemünde, which had terrorized Western Europe, was transported to the USA lock, stock and barrel. It soon became clear that the Nazis had a secret space program at Peenemünde and Nordhausen. The Hannibal craft utilized alternative propulsion systems such as vril power, possibly back-engineered from recovered crashed flying saucers. Prescott Bush was the grandfather of today's George W. Bush. Whilst working with the Bank of America and the Jewish Warburg brothers in Wall Street, Prescott Bush helped arrange vast loans to the Third Reich. The Third Reich's space scientists used Jewish prisoners as slaves to build gigantic underground bases and manufacture the V-2 rocket, which would terrorize Europe during 1944 and 1945. At Nordhausen and other sites in Germany and Austria, Werner von Braun and his team of Nazi SS engineers built vast laboratories and rocket factories. The interior of an entire mountain was excavated to accommodate a secret space facility which was no less than 1 million square feet. It was here, at Nordhausen, in top-secret underground bases, that a huge number of experimental rocket ships and circular flying discs were developed. The prototype V-7 craft was powered by engines manufactured by BMW. The V-7 used 12 BMW 028 engines, which were powered with helium. Radical fuselage shapes were developed, which would later lead to the emergence of stealth aircraft and the cruise missile. Werner von Braun and his team closely studied photographs of UFOs which had been photographed in Germany, Austria, Switzerland and Russia. These unidentified flying objects inspired the development of Nazi flying discs. After World War II, the underground base at Nordhausen was rebuilt in the Mojave Desert, a place we now know as Area 51.
A tremendous sighting took place, and I'm just completely baffled right now. So is Mr. Anthony Hilder.
Example of one of the many objects seen regularly in Las Vegas. Very bright object, just basically hovering over Las Vegas, 5:30 p.m. Cylindrical object, a craft. We believe it could be some kind of an observation platform.
In 2003, the skeptical magazine Fortean Times claimed that no such craft or Nazi secret space program had ever existed. But we have been given patents from leading German manufacturing companies, including UHA, Krups and BMW, which prove beyond all reasonable doubt that Hitler considered the Nazi secret space program a top priority. And more than 15 billion Deutschmarks were spent developing craft of all shapes and sizes. Secret memos from SS officers revealed that Werner von Braun and Hitler both believed that there were alien civilizations in the universe, and it was their intention to not only conquer all nations on planet Earth, but to also colonize the moon.
The conquest of outer space is the greatest technological challenge of the age in which we live. The first decisive step in the conquest of space will be the placing of an object into an orbit wherein it will indefinitely circle the Earth.
1954. Sputnik 1 shocks the world and puts the USSR way ahead in the Cold War. Sputnik 2 takes a dog into space, the first living creature to leave the face of planet Earth. Russia then shocks the world by sending an unmanned probe to the moon. Meanwhile, the US Army plan Project Horizon, a plan to colonize the moon with Americans. This plan was soon abandoned when the true nature of the hostile environment of outer space was discovered by American and Russian scientists. (1958). Spectacular rocket failures destroy American morale. The Explorer 1 space probe confirms planet Earth is surrounded by dangerous radiation. Radiation so powerful that it could cause nausea and cancer. The Van Allen radiation belts and solar particles from the Sun are extremely hazardous to humans. Space is also full of micrometeorites which can rip through spacesuits and metal in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Russia celebrate getting the first man into space, Mr. Yuri Gagarin.
Well, there was already a parallel space program, and it had been continuing from even before the time that NASA was created in 1958. October 1958, NASA were incorporated by President Eisenhower. The secret space program was run by the Department of Defense. It took its original form in Project Horizon, which was established in 1959, the habitation of the colonization of the moon. The reason for that was that whoever controlled the moon controlled the Earth. If you could launch rockets from the moon onto your enemies on Earth, they couldn't possibly retaliate, therefore you had the upper hand. There was a serious attempt, certainly a serious investigation, to put man on the moon and keep him there. So the secret parallel space program continues to this day. There is a military space shuttle, and even the ones that we see from Columbia onwards are designed according to the specification of the Department of Defense. If you look at them, they will carry spy satellites into orbit. And if you want to know what a spy satellite looks like, the Hubble telescope is one. That is the design of what's called the KH-12, the keyhole satellites, which are used today over enemy territory, which is presumably any territory that is not American.
Regardless of the dangers of radiation, and without having spacesuits nor spacecraft which can protect the occupants from radiation, NASA convinced the American people to pay $40 billion for the space program.
Most lethal forms of radiation, of course, are at the higher end of the spectrum. That's gamma rays and X-rays. We know what ultraviolet can do. If you stay out too long in the sun, you get sunburn and skin cancer and die, and it's all very sad. But gamma rays, and X-rays especially, are particularly lethal to humans, unprotected humans. There was no protection that I have been able to identify. I've found no reference to it. I found nothing that will tell me what level of protection is offered. So I have to assume none was.
Ex-Nazis were now in charge of vast amounts of tax dollars. In today's value, the Nazis at the heart of the NASA space program were given more than $600 billion. All NASA had to do was announce a new space project, and the money was handed over so that the American government could save face in the Cold War. Alan Shepard and John Glenn were blasted into space using equipment which was still in the prototype stage. John Glenn reports UFOs to Mission Control, which he describes as looking like fireflies, similar to the Foo Fighters reported by pilots during World War II. Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberth were later to confess that they both believe alien life forms exist and may have already visited planet Earth in the past. NASA soon learned that we are not alone in the universe. In Jonathan Eisen's excellent book, Suppressed Inventions, he interviews Werner von Braun's mentor and teacher, Dr. Hermann Oberth. Dr. Oberth makes it quite clear that he has studied the aeronautic performance of UFOs. In 1972, Dr. Hermann Oberth made the following statement. Today, we cannot produce machines that fly the same as UFOs do. They are flying by means of artificial fields of gravity. This would explain the sudden changes of directions. This hypothesis would also explain the piling up of these disks into a cylindrical or cigar-shaped mothership upon leaving the Earth. Because it is in this fashion that only one field of gravity would be required for all the flying saucers. Dr. Oberth then added, "We cannot take credit for our record advancement in certain scientific fields alone. We have been helped, and we have been helped by the people of other worlds." Dr. Hermann Oberth was the greatest pioneer of astronautics. Hermann Oberth made his statement in 1972. Almost 20 years later, in 1991, amateur footage of UFOs stacked up in a cylindrical formation was filmed in Mexico City.
We have many other reasons to believe that NASA has been lying in
It's
every
very difficult
respect.
to know if the politicians know the real truth or not. We know that there is government inside the government. We know that there is military intelligence. We know that in America, after the Manhattan Project was created,
that group subsists. And that group was the one who handled the Roswell crash, the Socorro crash, and others.
Are you talking about Majestic 12?
Yeah, probably it's a different name now. Now it's not Majestic 12, now it's something else.
I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports.
It's very difficult to know if Bush and Blair and others are puppets, or they are innocent, or they are the mastermind. What we really know is that there are many who decide together now have a very different policy around this phenomenon. We have to remember that when Gorbachev met Reagan, many times he asked about the technology that the United States have obtained from the others, and always Reagan, joking, replied to Gorbachev, "What did you do with it too?" They never said we are speaking about alien technology, but many times they spoke about the other technology. And we know that Gorbachev renounced to the race, the Cold era, because he learned that the United States had technology from these beings.
From the Greys?
From the Greys. From then on, we saw many cosmonauts talking openly about what they saw. We have different videos recorded by these cosmonauts where you can see strange things floating in the space.
Non ho fatto in tempo a prendere la macchina fotografica o una videocamera perché è sparito da circa 7 secondi. А где вы летели? На какой части Земли? Eravamo sopra il Newfoundland. Terra nuova.
We have also something very important, which is a video taken inside the space agency in Russia, where you can see the Mir surrounded by dozens of bright objects.
This is Mission Control Houston. We are using the payload bay cameras right now to hopefully catch a glimpse of the Russian space station Mir as it performs an on-orbit burn. The payload bay cameras are positioned such that they're looking straight back behind the orbiter, where the Mir is flying at about 850 nautical miles behind us.
No joy from here, sorry. Hope it was a good one though for our friends.
Thank you, sir. We could not see it here either. We'll wait 2 or 3 more minutes till sunrise, and then at that time give you a go for KU stow.
We're at a mission lapse time of 7 days, 13 hours, and 17 minutes. This is Mission Control Houston. The Mir space station is now visible.
Yeah, we do see something flashing visually, but we're not sure that might be...
This shot was obtained by the shuttle, by the Americans. NASA never released that piece of video. It means that we have 2 different positions. One that is openly saying, yes, we have experience out in the space.
That's the Russians.
The Russians. And we have the other, which is the NASA explanation that there is nothing in there. They don't release anything we have to obtain every evidence from an outside source, but not from NASA.
There are creatures living in outer space. And I'm the first one to realize how crazy that sounds. Scientists would immediately say, well, that's impossible. There's ultraviolet radiation in space. Without having a craft around you, you'll die. Well, all I can say is that these, I call them space serpents, they do exist. They've been filmed by Story Musgrave, who's a senior space shuttle commander. He's been with NASA for 30 years. He's seen one of these space serpents on 2 occasions. He's filmed it on 1 occasion. They've also been filmed from the ground, flying around in the upper atmosphere. Now, quite frankly, we don't know anything about the life cycle of these creatures, but they do fit in with the descriptions of other kinds of critters, other strange looking creatures that astronauts from the very early days of NASA have reported. I suspect that they use some form of photosynthesis, and I suspect that they hydrate themselves by flying in the upper atmosphere of planets. One important thing I must say though about these space serpents is that there are about 7 or 8 very, very important ancient sites, temple sites on planet Earth, most notably in Mexico. And these temples are dedicated to the memory of flying serpents. And this is what we see in this footage, is flying serpents. There also seems to be a very interesting relationship between the flying serpent and these small luminous spheres.
Control Control Houston, we are using the payload bay cameras right now to hopefully catch a glimpse of the Russian space station Mir as it performs an on-orbit burn. Though it will be difficult to pick Mir out from the stars as they pass behind us, the payload bay cameras are positioned such that they're looking straight back behind the orbiter, where the Mir is flying at about 850 nautical miles behind us.
Well, obviously this is a massive faux pas that this piece of footage was accidentally broadcast. The person who's passed me this piece of footage is now dead. The footage that we see, mostly of UFOs, has been filmed with image intensifying equipment.
No joy from here. Sorry. Hope it was a good one though for our friends.
Thank you, sir. We could not see it here either. We'll wait 2 or 3 more minutes till sunrise, and then at that time give you a go for KU stow.
We're at a mission elapsed time of 7 days, 13 hours, and 17 minutes. This is Mission Control Houston. The Mir space station is now visible on the far left-hand side of the screen, about an inch from the bottom of this particular picture. Okay, the Mir space station is the small flashing light in the center, about an inch from
Camera Charlie on a monitor.
the left-hand side of the screen. It's slowly...
Charlie, how on the camera?
It is slowly moving closer to the left-hand side and is has a very light flashing to it.
We think on the middle of the screen, way to the left-hand side. We think you can see a flashing light just a little bit to the left of the center of the screen, very faint.
Yeah, we do see something flashing visually, but we're not sure that that might be...
This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, we believe we were just able to spot the Mir spacecraft as it flies about 850 nautical miles behind us.
Yes, STS-80 was a very, very strange space shuttle mission. What we see is a lot of activity. It can't all be put down to natural phenomena. James Oberg at NASA and all the other pundits at NASA would love you to believe that these are all ice crystals and space junk and debris. Quite frankly, if there was that amount of debris, that sheer number of shooting stars flying around in close proximity to the space shuttle and the Mir space station, it would be not safe to put craft up into space. A piece of rock just a few millimeters across, travelling in the opposite direction of the space shuttle, would rip through the entire structure of the space shuttle and cause a fatal accident. You see objects which are out of focus, or they are transparent in some kind of way. And the first one comes from behind the space shuttle, comes into the field of view, and they make their way to the upper atmosphere. That's at least what it looks like. It's joined by many others, and you get a kind of rough circular formation appearing. And then you get the piece de resistance. The last orb comes into the center of this formation, and as soon as it finds its position, it lights up. And then you can see a sort of dance of lights around this formation. Now, this suggests to me incredible intelligence. It suggests to me that they are saying, look at us, look how clever we are. And it's an astounding piece of footage. These extraterrestrial craft are attracted to thunderstorms, and many times we see lightning on the surface of the planet or in the atmosphere of planet Earth. And as soon as these electric storms start, the UFOs swarm into the area. It's almost as if they're harvesting the electromagnetic energy within the atmosphere. And in actual fact, there are unseen forces in the atmosphere, etheric flows of what the German scientist Wilhelm Reich described as orgone energy. And it could be possible that these UFOs are sucking energy from these electric thunderstorms on planet Earth, and this is where they're getting their energy from. You should concentrate on the first object that appears, and you will see that it holds its position. Many TV stations have actually broadcast this STS-80 concentrate footage on the first object that appears, and you will see that it holds its position. Many TV stations have actually broadcast this STS-80 footage, but they only show you the few seconds of the large glowing orb coming from the lower atmosphere. The cameraman who's operating the space shuttle camera is fully aware that the first object has held its position, and after the large orb has ascended from the lower atmosphere and the shuttle is moving away from the scene, the cameraman is actually zooming in at the end of the sequence to double check the position of the first luminous orb, and it's a fascinating piece of video. A few years ago there was an astounding book published. It's called The Day After Roswell. and it's written by a gentleman called Philip Corso, who's now dead. He had a military career that lasted more than 20 years, and during that time he served at the White House, and then he was a senior official at the Pentagon. And in this book, which is an astounding book, he clearly says that there is a war going on in space. In other words, NASA and the American military have designed weapons. He says in his book that some of the weapons are based on patents of the genius inventor Nikola Tesla. Philip Corso tells us that there are plasma beam weapons being used against these UFOs, and that sometimes these UFOs are hit. A special team then travel out to wherever it is in the world and collect the wreckage. Now, from the wreckage they back engineer any useful technology. In his book he clearly states that microchips, semiconductors, fiber optics, lasers, many other new metal alloys have all been back engineered from wreckage which they've collected from UFOs which have been shot down by the American government. I believe that what we're seeing with the footage from Space Shuttle mission STS-48, that we are seeing several intelligently controlled extraterrestrial craft. And yes, I do believe that the flashes are the firing of some very, very top secret weapon which is able to produce an electronic or electromagnetic plasma kind of death ray that is being used against these UFOs. I do believe that that is exactly what we're seeing.
The tether has broken. It is going away from us. Get it on the TV. TV. Tether has broken. Copy.
Space Shuttle mission STS-75, the tether incident. A lot has been said about this incident. Personally, I feel that most of the objects that you see are actual individual parts of the tether, just floating around in space, and that they're out of focus. It's a fascinating piece of footage, and I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't, quite a few UFOs coming into the scene to check out our technology, just as the same as they've done many times before.
the crew can see the tether and see the satellite. It's beautiful. This view showing the satellite. Again, just moving into sunrise. 81 nautical miles now from Columbia.
You clearly hear one of the astronauts being told there's an object at your 11 o'clock position.
It's about your 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock going away. Don't worry about it.
And the other astronaut, who's obviously in the know, says don't worry about it.
Out there. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
I suspect that the senior astronauts, the astronauts who've been up more than just once, are fully aware that there is a very large number of unexplainable objects flying around.
Never mind.
NASA spent gigantic sums of money during the 1960s, but most of it was spent on the ground, not in space. Huge American corporations, many of which were manufacturing hardware for the military, made gigantic profits designing space vehicles and, more importantly, life-sized models of spaceships, and even huge stage sets resembling the lunar surface.
Obviously, if you're going to somewhere that nobody has been before, you need to have a simulator which recreates that environment as closely as you can. If you're going to the moon, you recreate the surface of the moon. And here we see a section of the lunar surface created. It's about 30 foot high, 30 foot long, 35 foot long. Scale is given by the two people standing in front of it. There were plenty of simulation exercises, but the point is, and this should be taken into account in virtually everything that is discussed with the Apollo program, 400,000 people may have worked on the program in total, but none of them had a need to know more than his own job required. The people who were making the rockets didn't know what the people who were making the spacesuits were doing, and because they had no need to know about that. Their job was to make the best models and the best simulation of the lunar surface that they could. And if we come up to this picture here, we see the three scales on which these models were built. We have here the whole moon as one unit. It stands about 20 foot high. We have here behind it a section of the surface of the moon. You'll notice it's curved. And here we have a more detailed section of the lunar surface.
What you're saying is that the images which we're told show a camera pointing out the window of the lunar module as it's coming into land on the moon could well have been filmed previously using these large-scale models.
That's right. It could well be that what we are looking at are films of realistic models. We have no means of knowing if they were actually taken on the lunar surface or whether what we're watching is part of the simulation exercise and the training exercise. And you'll notice here on these models there is a camera track. A camera starting at this end, coming down here, would approach the moon or appear to approach the moon and become ever closer towards it. It's exactly what you would expect to see if you were flying to the moon. This is a simulation rig that was built. This is the command and service module of the Apollo program. And you'll notice that the window here looks out onto a block here. And there's another one here. They're curved. These are the screens onto which the lunar surface was projected as the craft made a simulated approach towards the lunar surface.
Is what we're seeing a mixture of fact and fiction?
It is fact, it is fiction. It's mixed together. It's hard to separate them until you examine it closely. If a spacecraft is in deep space, the only possible explanation for a light seen through the window of the spacecraft is the sun. It's the only bright light in space. If it's not the sun, then it has to be some other artificial light, which implies that that particular image is possibly fiction.
July 1961. NASA was soon being criticized for the flimsy construction of their hardware. The first orbital capsules did not even have windows in them for the astronauts to look out of. One of the most vocal critics was one of NASA's most respected astronauts, an all-American hero named Virgil Gus Grissom, who almost drowned when recovery helicopters were unable to lift his space capsule from the sea. After a successful journey into space, Gus Grissom almost died through NASA's bad planning. Or was this an most vocal critics was one of NASA's most respected astronauts, an all-American hero named Virgil Gus Grissom, who almost drowned when recovery helicopters were unable to lift his space capsule from the sea. After a successful journey into space, Gus Grissom almost died through NASA's bad planning. Or was this an early attempt to silence Gus Grissom? May 1963. Astronaut Gordon Cooper experiences re-entry problems in his Faith 7 rocket ship.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Roger, have a lift off and the clock is operating. Roger clock. Take my 7, base 7 on the way.
The prototype lunar module, known as the LIM, had serious stability problems. At this stage, there was no guarantee that even if NASA managed to get a spaceship orbiting the moon, they could land safely without killing the crew. June 1965. Gemini 4 is launched and the first man walks in space.
Flight departure started. I'm going to drag a little bit so I don't want to fire the gun yet. Okay, I'm out. Okay, now, hold the
Extensive rehearsals at docking spacecraft were performed in low Earth orbit. Everything was recorded on film. This footage would later become invaluable as NASA sought to fake the success of the Apollo missions. Meanwhile, more problems occurred. On Gemini 9, the second spacewalk had to be cut short due to problems with the astronauts' oxygen supply. On Gemini 11, another attempt to walk in space was curtailed due to fatigue. Was this a sign that cosmic radiation caused nausea and fatigue? NASA could not risk the public humiliation of having brave astronauts crashing to their deaths on the lunar surface broadcast on live TV. NASA's Nazis knew that a major catastrophic failure on the moon would cause the billions of dollars of funding to be immediately cut. Anyone with the most elementary grasp of science could tell that the Saturn V rockets were merely big versions of the Nazis' V-2 killing machines. It is wrongly perceived by the mainstream media that there has never been an official report of a UFO by any NASA astronaut. This is simply not so. Since the early experimental orbital craft were developed by ex-Nazi SS officers on behalf of NASA, American astronauts have continually reported strange UFOs. In many cases, photographs and even film was shot of these mysterious, unidentified flying objects. During his pioneering orbital flights in the Gemini 7 capsule, NASA astronaut Jim Lovell clearly alerted mission control of a bogey at 10 o'clock high. Capcom at Houston asked James Lovell if he had an actual sighting of a UFO. Lovell answered, "We have several, an actual sighting."
Gemini 7 here, Houston on your 8. Last clear, 7, go ahead. I bogey at 10 o'clock high. This is Houston, say again, 7. We have a bogey at 10 o'clock high. Roger.
On the 4th of June 1965, astronaut James McDivitt reported seeing a cylindrical-shaped craft. Could this be one of the cigar-shaped motherships which have been filmed from the ground on many occasions, most notably in Russia and California during the 1970s? Former astronaut Gordon Cooper has publicly stated that his interest in UFOs was one of the reasons why he became an astronaut in the first place. In 1978, Gordon Cooper attended a meeting of the Special Political Committee at the United Nations General Assembly in order to discuss the UFO phenomenon. In a letter signed by Gordon Cooper, he said, "I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets. In 1951, I had the opportunity to observe flights of UFOs of different sizes flying in fighter formation from east to west over Europe." In a tape-recorded interview given by Cooper in 1973, he stated, "For many years I have lived with a secret, in a secrecy imposed on all specialists in astronautics. I can now reveal that every day in the USA, our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us."
I wonder, did you have anyone call you knew about a strange plane or airplane or something in the air that...
Where?
It was coming down Sampson Drive. I don't know what it was. It was a flying saucer.
What did it look like, ma'am?
It was like a, almost like an iridescent color. It was like a bluish purple.
I could see a red glow up in the sky. It was huge.
People are serious. They're very upset.
Whatever it was lit up, I mean literally, if you were underneath it, you could see it would be like daylight with red light.
It changes colors from white to red to green. The sucker has not moved.
We have multiple departments right now that have sightings on it.
This is not a prank phone call, I swear you.
How is it?
They're sitting stationary. I got 3 of them.
What do they look like?
I've got 4 discernible colors. I got red, yellow, green, and blue. And the one just was like flashes. So if they're those planets those guys were talking about, then they're planets with Christmas lights on. This is weird.
In 2002, astronaut Scott Carpenter was interviewed by the late Graham Birdsall of the British UFO magazine. Scott Carpenter and his fellow veteran astronaut friend John Glenn both witnessed strange creatures in space during their pioneering flights.
There were so many unknowns in the early days. And this is a fact of the matter. We were really not sure after John flew whether or not there were critters, living critters out there somewhere.
После этого, значит, у нас что-то закрутится, мы все ведем, потом начинаем проверку.
Yes, we have some, not thousands, some cases when Russian astronauts watched objects. Yes. Very, maybe few, not so far from the space station. Mostly over the Earth, very close to Earth, but it doesn't matter. From outer space, you can see it as if it's very, very close to you. And I talked to Musa Manarov and I talked to Gennady Strikalov and the other astronauts, and they told me that they have seen much more cases of UFOs, but without possibility to film it, because he said, it's always like with Russians. When you see something, whether this camera is without battery or with battery lying at the other end of a spacecraft, or, as Musa once told me, I see strange, interesting objects, but at the same time a spacecraft is coming to me and I need to dock the battery lying at the other end of a spacecraft, or, as Musa once told me, I see strange, interesting objects, but at the same time a spacecraft is coming to me and I need to dock it, and I can't leave the place and film it. You know, we have been investigating this particular question, and we came to very interesting conclusions. I wouldn't say that millions of people or thousands, no, but there are many people who have not been abducted because on their level of knowledge and on their level of understanding and abilities, they do not need to abduct people. No. I will try to explain what's going on.
When you say they, you're talking about the...
It is, yes, it is. It is. When it is are flying here, there are some kind of scientific expeditions which are visiting the planet. For us it was very unusual to find out that the deepest and the most important interest for them is the God. Who is He? They are looking and searching for God, yes, and His creation, ways, understand everything. And they can learn it only in one way, if they learn and check how big human groups are behaving, kind of a invisible influence, and how people are reacting. At the same time, there is another very interesting technology. When they meet a person, they take from a person kind of an informational hologram. This hologram, which any human being have, contain in itself information about previous lives, about present life, and something about possible future. They take this hologram, informational hologram, and then to be able to read it, to decode information, they need to have a special key. This special key is the sample of your way of thinking. For this reason, to have this key, they somehow transmit into your brains a hard idea, like, just an example, you are living wrong. You broke our laws on this planet. This is the reason why very soon, when the sky became dark, thousands and thousands of people will die, and only few of them will stay alive. And at this particular moment, when a human being starts to analyze this information, they just read it, like they take it like from a computer. Hops, that's it. They don't need anything. They take this hologram, they take this key, and then keeping this hologram anywhere there, they can have any information about a human being and what's going on with him and his surroundings.
April 2003, American troops go to the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad, and they set explosives and they blast the doors of the museum off its hinges. I heard those reports and I thought, well, this is just obviously a continuation of what was going on during the Desert Storm invasion of Iraq that was perpetrated by George Bush Sr. And now we know that there's George Bush Jr. blowing the doors off of the National Museum. So what's taken? Well, surprise, surprise. Thousands of objects are taken, and they mostly come from the Assyrian, Babylonian and Sumerian kingdoms of ancient Iraq. Some of these items are to do with the legends, the history, the Sumerian histories of the gods who came from the stars, and they have become known as the Anunnaki. $2 billion a week is being spent by the American military forces, by George Bush Jr. And it's not just museums that are being looted. Archaeological sites have been bulldozed by American military forces. What military advantage there is to bulldozing a site, I'm not sure. Obviously, there is no military objective. There is no military objective to shooting dead an old lady who's gone out one morning to buy a loaf of bread. There's no military objective whatsoever in opening fire on a market full of people selling goats. There's no military objective whatsoever in bombing children. Now, I wanted to make this film 8 years ago, and I've got lots of friends who write books about UFOs and extraterrestrials. When I told them, you know, my idea for this film, the full idea, lots of them said, for God's sake, don't make that film, because, you know, you're mixing up, you know, the war in Iraq with extraterrestrials, and you know, people aren't going to see the connection. It's going to be a very, very difficult film. So Secret Space Volume 1, which is what I made in 2005, should have been Volume 2, and this film should have been Volume 1. But basically my conviction of 8 years ago has become stronger and stronger as I've seen events unfold in Iraq. There is wholesale tracking down of people going on in Iraq by American military forces under the command of George Bush. People are being systematically hunted down, and they're being tortured and then killed. If they're really lucky, they'll just be killed.
Wounded, another Iraqi writhes on the ground. The Marines kill him, then cheer.
Like, man, these guys are dead now, you know. But it was a good feeling. And afterwards, you're like, hell yeah, that was awesome. Let's do it again.
I've heard one report of a gentleman who was working at a local garage. Walking home from work one day, he was asked for his identity papers by an American military officer. And while he was looking in his pockets for his identity papers, the officer took out a sword. It's the first I've known that swords are being issued by the American military. And they cut his head off. This does not fit into any kind of pattern at all until you realise that they are deliberately hunting down and trying to kill certain people in Iraq because, and this is what I believe, there are the odd remnants of a bloodline that goes back to the Sumerian kingdom. And I believe that certain people, unbeknowing even to those people, have within their genetic makeup remnants of a bloodline that was mixed long ago, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 years ago, with the genetic material from invading star gods. And the American military are doing their damnedest at the moment to hunt down these people and kill them. and to erase them, and therefore erase the remnants of this bloodline. Just 6 miles of atmosphere separate mankind from outer space. Roger Bannister, the man who ran the 4-minute mile, could run that distance in just 24 minutes, from the surface of our planet into space in just 5 minutes. Once in space, everything is different. With no atmosphere, the human eye can see for literally hundreds of millions of miles. Space is not an empty vacuum. 99% of all matter exists in space. It's invisible and is called dark matter. The space around planet Earth is full of invisible radio waves. The signals from our television, radio and telephone networks travel very fast in space. Every month, planet Earth sends out 1 trillion individual radio broadcasts, which reach the planet Saturn within 11 days of leaving the surface of planet Earth. For the last 30 years, mankind has been sending small probes into space. The oldest of these probes, Voyager 1, Voyager 2 and the Pioneer probes, were launched 30 years ago and have now left the solar system. The Pioneer and Voyager probes are fitted with a gold plaque which contains a map of how to find planet Earth, a diagram of what we look like, and an audio recording from Secretary General of the United Nations, an ex-Nazi called Kurt Waldheim. This film is about the scientists and government agencies who have, throughout the ages, kept a very big secret from mankind. For the first time on film, we expose the cosmic conspiracy against mankind, the conspiracy of silence led by NASA, which keeps us all living in ignorance of the greatest revelation in human history, that we, mankind, are not alone in the universe, that within our own galaxy, thousands of life forms exist, which, like us, have the ability to build and fly craft which can travel from one planet to the other. This is the untold story of archaeologists, astronomers, astronauts, and scientists who have been airbrushed out of history because they told the truth. The truth is that planet Earth has been invaded by aliens many times in the past. Rock art preserved from thousands of years ago clearly show aliens interacting with humans and animals. ancient legends from the Himalayas, Middle East and Americas say that some aliens were benevolent and taught early man how to make electricity. Some aliens were neutral and just observed us. Our biblical forefathers called them the Watchers, and the hybrid human-alien offspring were called the Nephilim, shall be called evil spirits when they come to live on earth. Evil spirits shall exude from their flesh, because they were created from a mixture of mankind and the Watchers who fly above. Himalayan legends tell of flying craft which exterminated whole regions of planet Earth using atomic weapons. Hostile aliens have invaded Earth many times, causing human civilization to crumble into dust, only to be rebuilt over thousands of years. Having been accused of planning the 9/11 terror attacks as an inside job, and having been exposed as a long-time member of the Skull and Bones secret society with macabre rituals, George W. Bush's popularity fell to an all-time low prior to the 2004 presidential election. Bush staged a grand photo opportunity at NASA, using the American space program as a grand charade, making a speech from NASA headquarters about the future exploration of space. But the speech by George W. Bush is not about the exploration of space. It is more about the exploitation of space. The US government has weaponized space. In December 2006, Nexus magazine republished news reports which claimed that communist Chinese satellites had fired laser beams at satellites owned by the American government. Star Wars are happening right now. There are thousands of satellites in orbit. Many contain small nuclear reactors. When one of these nuclear-powered satellites falls back to Earth, it is like a silent H-bomb, depositing radioactive dust into the atmosphere. Just 1 pound of plutonium dust deposited into the Earth's atmosphere would kill all living creatures and plant life on the face of the planet. The US government presently has nearly 50 pounds of plutonium orbiting planet Earth in a range of military satellites. Shortly before his death, retired Pentagon officer Colonel Philip Corso wrote a book called The Day After Roswell. In this astounding book, he claimed that the Star Wars weapon system was placed in orbit to repel alien invaders.
For more than 50 years, the war against UFOs has continued as we try to defend ourselves against intrusion. The Hughes Hunter killer satellites of the 1970s were our first steps in deploying a planetary defense system that held any threat to the aliens. The US military has better, more accurate, and more powerful weapons for killing UFOs than were deployed in the movie Independence Day.
Before he became president, Jimmy Carter made an official UFO report, saying that he had personally witnessed a UFO the size of the moon. During the Carter presidency, the CIA and FBI came under pressure from UFO investigators and the Carter administration to reveal what they knew about the UFO phenomenon. At first, the CIA denied ever having kept documents about UFOs. But during the Carter administration, Freedom of Information Act requests from UFO research groups forced the CIA to publish an embarrassing list of documents. Thousands of pages of investigations into the UFO phenomenon were finally made available to the public. At the same time, the FBI were forced to admit that not only had they kept UFO reports on file, but they had actively tapped the phones and secretly searched the homes of people who claimed they had been abducted by aliens. Of all the government agencies who have been deliberately silent regarding the possibility of aliens visiting planet Earth, it is the National Aeronautical and Space Administration, NASA, which has steadfastly refused to admit that they are actively involved in UFO research. However, we now know that NASA are actively involved in UFO research. More than 20 space shuttle missions have returned from space with video footage of unidentified flying objects. On every occasion, NASA have claimed that UFOs filmed by NASA astronauts are nothing more than ice particles and debris floating in space. However, since the 1950s, more than 15 NASA astronauts have reported UFOs to mission control.
unidentified flying object.
On March the 14th, 1989, amateur radio enthusiasts recorded a transmission on a secret NASA frequency from Space Shuttle pilot John Blah.
Houston, this is Discovery. We still have the alien spacecraft under observance.
NASA have been caught red-handed on many occasions. NASA have refused to admit they are actively monitoring the presence. Another ex-NASA employee, a Moroccan named Maurice Chatelain, published a book in 1978 in which he claimed that 2 UFOs hovered above the Sea of Tranquility just before the historic moonwalk of Neil Armstrong. Maurice Chatelain was a NASA insider. He invented many of the radio and radar communication systems for the Apollo missions. He had 11 patents awarded for his inventions and had a high-level NASA security clearance, able to talk freely with senior NASA officials. In his book, he quoted radio transmissions between Apollo astronauts and mission control. According to Maurice Chatelain, the astronauts informed NASA that there were alien spacecraft lined up on the far side of a nearby crater, observing the historic moonwalk of Neil Armstrong. During his time working on the Apollo space program, Chatelain learnt that aliens not only exist, but that they have had a major role in shaping, and in some cases destroying, civilization. The title of Maurice Chatelain's book proves he was in no doubt that aliens had invaded planet Earth in the past. The elite use the international network of secret societies to honor and control the government and military officials who work on secret projects for the elite. In fact, the oldest secret society known to mankind was formed in ancient international network of secret societies to honor and control the government and military officials who work on secret projects for the elite. In fact, the oldest secret society known to mankind was formed in ancient Babylon and is called the Brotherhood of the Snake. If you study the legends of the North American shamans, the mythologies of ancient Europe, the creation histories of the Australian Aborigines, or the ancient Vedic texts of India, and especially the Sumerian clay tablets from ancient Iraq, we find that all great civilizations on the face of planet Earth tell one similar story. That is, in the distant past, people from the stars visited planet Earth and displayed fantastic technology. Sometimes they genetically engineered humans. Sometimes they directly interbred with humans. These so-called sky gods always visited in spectacular flying vehicles.
And the watchers from the sky saw the daughter of men were beautiful, and they bred with them. And the children were giants, who become rulers, not of human flesh. They were called the Nephilim.
The most ancient written texts on planet Earth date from the Indus Valley and make up a corpus of works called the Vedas. The Bhagavad Gita is an ancient Hindu text which is at least 5,000 years old. This epic mythology inspired the character known as Darth Vader in the Star Wars movies. The Bhagavad Gita described many gods of the stars flying down to planet Earth in alien spacecraft called Vimanas. The ancient Vedas tell us that there are multiple inhabited planetary systems in the universe called Devas, which are ruled by a universal government of beings with superhuman powers and technology, including the power of telepathy and nuclear weapons powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. The Hindu legends tell us that the Vimanas were like flying saucers, which had stealth technology, able to make themselves invisible, and were able to detect enemy craft at great distances using a form of psychometric radar. The most ancient text of Central America is the Popol Vuh, written by the Mayans who charted the heavens and had astronomical calendars which predicted solar and lunar eclipses. The Popol Vuh describes the ancestors of the Mayans as great explorers who knew centuries before European scientists that the Earth was not flat, but in actual fact a sphere. The Popol Vuh mentions a great god-king called Quetzalcoatl, who is depicted as a flying serpent. On more than 3 different occasions, in broad daylight, these flying serpents have often been seen surrounded by spherical UFOs, which are often metallic in appearance. Mexican UFO investigators call these spherical luminosities Las Perlas, or the pearls. These pearls of the sky are mentioned in ancient Tibetan scriptures. More than one leading Tibetan author suspects that these spherical UFOs are actually alien probes monitoring the evolution of mankind. These small spherical UFOs, which are the most common type of UFO filmed in the skies worldwide, are described in the ancient Buddhist text known as the Cantua. The Cantua describes the exact same spherical UFO phenomena which has been filmed in the skies above London, in Scotland, the south of France, and also many times in Mexico. According to self-styled Tibetan mystic and British author Cyril Hoskin, Tibetan Lama Mingya Donda told disciples that a group of Tibetan lamas had established communication with space gods who said that they were watching Earth in the same way as humans watch animals in a zoo. A royal document dating back to the 7th century states that the first 7 Tibetan kings came from the stars. Medieval art is full of UFOs. Some are seen beaming lasers directly into the minds of people. Medieval artists associated the occupants of UFOs with the world of God. Jesus is pictured in many paintings where alien craft can clearly be seen hovering in the background. Medieval painters used their art as a way of giving people the message that UFOs exist and that aliens have been involved in controlling the destiny of mankind. There are even medieval paintings clearly showing satellites and other forms of technology. British author Matthew Hurley has collected dozens of pieces of ancient art which all show UFOs and aliens. In addition to dozens of paintings, there are also hand-printed newsletters from the medieval era which report UFOs, luminous balls of light, and even an alien invasion in the Mediterranean. According to a medieval manuscript, in 1608, reptilian aliens landed on the shores of Genoa and Nice, causing panic and fear amongst the inhabitants. The manuscript is a news report entitled "Frightening Screaming and Signs from the Sea at Genoa." Genoa was the hometown of Christopher Columbus. On October the 11th, 1492, whilst halfway across the Atlantic on his voyage to discover America, Columbus saw a UFO and recorded the event in his ship's log. At the same time Columbus recorded a UFO hovering above the Atlantic Sea, the Aztec civilization of Central America carved figurines of men with reptilian bodies. On the opposite border of Tibet stands the Bayankara Ula mountain range, which separates Tibet from communist China. There, small skeletons with oversized skulls have been found. The tribes in the Bayan Mountains have a detailed mythology involving star beings crash-landing spaceships in the distant past. Chinese archaeologist Qi Pu Tei conducted an expedition to the area in 1938 and discovered caves which had carved pictograms showing star charts, the moon and the earth with dotted lines showing the orbits of planets. Jade figurines have been found in this area, which display a remarkable similarity to the grey aliens reported worldwide by millions. Were discovered in 1938. The skeletons were in graves on the floor of caves, which had walls covered in star map pictograms. The graves were laid out in geometric lines. Amongst these graves, hundreds of circular stone plates were discovered which had spiral etchings on them. Each stone disc was approximately 9 inches in diameter and had a fine groove spiraling out from the center to the rim, making each disc look like a prehistoric version of a modern vinyl record. In all, 716 stone plates were found. These became known as the Dropa stones. In 1962, Professor Sun Nui at the Academy for Prehistoric Research in Peking translated the engravings on the Dropa stones. The history of local tribes were inscribed on the Dropa stones, which claimed that 12,000 years ago, aliens crash-landed in the Bayan mountain range. This was apparently one of the least successful alien invasions, as, according to the Dropa stone legend, the aliens were killed by local villagers because of their non-human appearance. Ancient Aboriginal rock art shows many examples of alien-type beings which are known as Wanjinas. Every year, Aboriginal tribespeople travel to remote parts of Western Australia and repaint the outline of the Wanjinas, who are known as the creator spirits of the Aborigines. By repainting the figures, Aborigines are making sure the memory of these Wangina creatures are never forgotten. Well, I had some copies made of some of the most important pieces of rock art from around the world, and this is a copy of a piece of rock art that was discovered by a chap called Joseph Bradshaw in the 1800s. And the Bradshaw Foundation has done really excellent work in finding, collating and protecting a lot of the rock art in Western Australia. And this piece of rock art has been reproduced in several books, most recently a book by Terry Wilson called The Secret History of Crop Circles. And this is a kind of facsimile copy. It makes it obviously a lot easier to look at the different elements when it's been copied into a painting like this. I suppose the most striking feature is this, what can only be described as a spaceman. It's obviously got, you know, some kind of space helmet thing there. There's some kind of bulbous point on his head. And then he seems to be looking in the direction of this kind of aeriform shape that seems to be floating in the air. Now, in the centre, you have a shape there that could easily be interpreted as a flying saucer. There's also these round spherical shapes. These are often found, actually, these round spherical motifs are often found in relationship to other motifs that can easily be spherical shapes. These are often found, actually, these round spherical motifs are often found in relationship to other motifs that can easily be interpreted as flying saucers. There seems to be some kind of wave pattern there. Obviously that could be, you know, birds in the distance, but it seems to me that sort of suggests some kind of wave energy. And fleeing from the spaceman and this aeriform and these spheres and this UFO are wallabies or kangaroos. And what's really fascinating is that in the lower right hand corner there are two figures, a man and a woman, which do not have Aboriginal facial features. In actual fact, they have European features. And this mirrors exactly what we find on the other side of planet Earth, where we have characters in rock art from, you know, thousands of years ago, centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries ago, with people with European features. Well, in Kimberley in Australia, in the ancient era from where all of this rock art dates from, there should have been no European people at all. And the same thing can be said about Central and South America. In Central and South America, these beings which we find in the ancient art in that particular part of the planet are called the Viracocha. And they were beings who came from the stars and gave the peoples of Central and South America knowledge of mathematics and astronomy and other forms of knowledge. And here in Kimberley in Western Australia, in an ancient era when there shouldn't have been any European people whatsoever, we again find this kind of theme of European looking beings. And he has a beard, he has a kind of punky kind of Sex Pistols, Johnny Rotten haircut. The woman has a very strange hair design that looks like some kind of medieval jester's hat, which is very strange. And the look on their faces is that of awe and terror. They're even sort of holding up their hands, either in veneration of this spaceman or in horror of the spaceman. Now, what's really fascinating is that on the ground, below the flying saucer and the spheres, you have a spiral pattern which is quite reminiscent of the spiral groove workings which we find in Ireland and Scotland on lots of the monoliths there. But this spiral pattern seems to be drawn in a kind of perspective way, and I think it suggests that there is a crop circle there. And of course we know that there are many, many pieces of footage of small balls of light actually creating crop circles. And this may be one of the most important pieces of evidence in the whole area of crop circle research. Now, another really very, very interesting point that I find is that the entire scene is encircled by a serpent, by a snake. This is the head of the snake, and it goes all the way around, and his tail is almost being swallowed. Now, the snake, you know, in a lot of books, I collect a hell of a lot of books. Mostly the snake is considered as a symbol of wisdom in the ancient era. And, you know, I thought, well, when I first came across this notion years ago, I thought, well, that's, you know, quite interesting. But, you know, when I look at snakes, and I live in a hot area where there are snakes, they don't particularly strike me as being really, really super intelligent animals. Certainly they have a vindictive kind of survival quality of intelligence, but they don't strike me as being like dolphins, which, you know, when you swim with dolphins, you can really, really tell that they're very, very, very intelligent creatures. And so I did some reading and research into how this notion of the snake representing wisdom and knowledge in the ancient world came about. And my research really led me to, you know, make this film in a way, because what I found is that it wasn't actually snakes that were venerated as being intelligent. It was the reptilian aspect to their being that was associated with reptilian or serpent-like creatures in the legendary histories of planet Earth, characters like Quetzalcoatl in Mexico that brought the civilizations of Central and South America, you know, fantastic knowledge about the stars, and other reptilian beings, such as Nukua, which was a reptilian goddess in ancient China. It was this notion that these reptilian beings that came from the stars, full of knowledge, genetics and science, which then was oversimplified and throughout history came down to the point where the snake represents wisdom of the ancient world. Nazca in Peru is one of the largest archaeological sites in the world. Thousands of earthworks have been etched into the rock of the Nazca Desert. The summits of entire mountains have been scraped away to make space for parallel lines and giant pictograms of creatures which can only be seen from the air. Skeletons with elongated skulls like a grey alien have been found near Nazca. World-famous author Eric von Daniken has made a detailed study of the Nazca area. He has visited local people who have private collections of stone figurines which show detailed depictions of heart surgery and European-type men using what appear to be telescopes. Thousands of these ancient stone figurines have been found and are thought to be at least 3,000 years old. Time and time again, people who have been abducted by aliens claim that they received telepathic messages from these beings. Many people claim that the Greys are a telepathic species who do not speak, but prefer to transfer thoughts containing colors and symbols with the power of their minds. In Kimberley, Western Australia, Wangina-type figures have been found which have halos, and some even have antennas coming from their heads. The halos and antennas could be a symbolic representation of the power of telepathy. Again, mirrored on the far side of planet Earth, thousands of miles from Australia, we see the same type of alien creatures with antennas depicted on rock art. These alien figures were carved onto the rocks thousands of years ago and are known as the antenna people. Some authors have interpreted the mythologies of ancient Greece to infer that aliens from another world invaded and gave mankind the secrets to mathematics and astronomy. Greek mythology is full of strange alien-type creatures and beings with supernatural powers and advanced technology. In 1900, the wreck of an ancient ship was found off the coast of Crete near the island of Antikythera. Divers found lumps of corroded bronze and took their find to Spiridon Staios at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Spiridon Staios discovered a complex and elegantly made mechanism, like the interior of an expensive handmade clock, inside the corroded lumps of bronze. In 1902, he proclaimed the object to be thousands of years old and called it the Antikythera mechanism. In 1958, British scientist Dr. Derek de Sawyer Price studied the Antikythera mechanism and claimed it was a clockwork computer able to accurately predict the movement of stars and planets. The Antikythera mechanism is likely to have been made in the Hellenistic era of ancient Greece. No other ancient clockwork mechanism can be found in any other museum worldwide. Indeed, there is no mention of clockwork technology being used during this era anywhere on planet Earth. In 1971, the Antikythera mechanism was X-rayed, and scientists were astounded to discover that there were complicated meshing gears, far more advanced and complicated than the clocks which were invented for maritime navigation in the 1500s. Dr. de Sawyer Price stated that the Antikythera mechanism was so sophisticated and ahead of its time that it was like discovering a jet airliner inside an ancient Egyptian tomb. The mechanism had clearly been owned by someone who kept its existence absolutely secret. All over planet Earth, archaeological evidence of alien invasions exists, none more so than in ancient Iraq, the country which gave birth to the Sumerian and Babylonian empires. 6,000-year-old clay tablets tell of aliens invading from the stars who enslaved and genetically modified mankind. These alien gods were called the Anunnaki. There is evidence that alien invaders inspired ancient man to create electricity. Electricity was only discovered, or should we say rediscovered, in 1786 by the Italian Luigi Galvani. In 1936, Wilhelm Koenig discovered a clay vase in the vaults of the Baghdad Museum. The vase is thought to date from the Sumerian civilization, which predates the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Inside this ancient clay vase was a copper cylinder with an iron rod running through the center, capped with oxidized lead. Koenig immediately realized that this was an ancient battery. Egyptologist Dr. Arne Egbrecht discovered another so-called Baghdad battery during his expedition in Iraq. He poured grape juice into the vase, and a voltometer immediately registered half a volt of electricity. where did this notion of electricity thousands of years ago come from? Was it inspired by the technology brought to planet Earth by the Anunnaki aliens? According to figurines and legends in ancient Iraq, the Anunnaki were reptilian humanoids. They are depicted in ancient Sumerian art as suckling human babies to their reptilian breasts. 3,500 years ago, during the reign of King Thutmose III, ancient Egypt was invaded by spherical UFOs which were described as circles of fire. According to ancient papyrus, these spherical UFOs filled the sky for several days. In his fascinating book, British author Matthew Deleuze shows photos of strange alien reptiles, some with the bodies of apes and heads of lizards. These can be found on the walls of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Egypt. Here we see reptilian humanoid creatures alongside pharaohs and bird-headed beings. Strange giant light bulbs, possibly some form of plasma beam weapon, can clearly be seen at the Temple of Hathor. Inside these strange devices there are serpents. This is possibly a pictorial message that this alien plasma technology was given to the elite of ancient Egypt by a serpent or reptilian race of aliens. Like the Antikythera mechanism from ancient Greece and the Baghdad battery, this plasma technology was a closely guarded secret technology reserved for the use of the elite in ancient Egypt. Just as we see today, the royal political elite have secret underground bases harboring secret stealth technology and flying saucer type craft. more ancient than the Mayan kingdoms of Central America, older than ancient Greece, and predating the pharaonic dynasties of Egypt. The Sumerian Empire was formed more than 6,000 years ago, stretching from the Indus Valley region in Pakistan to the capital called Uruk. Sumeria is known as the cradle of civilization. It was here that white-skinned peoples from the Caucasus Mountains spread a worldwide cult of blood ritual and magic to the rest of the world.
Hayat nevet, emenet nevet, edefulet ef, awet ef, haset, semawu em sanut.
Two authors, Zechariah Sitchin and the British genius John Marco Allegro, who translated large parts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, studied ancient Sumerian clay tablets, which were discovered at Nineveh in the 1800s. These clay tablets told the history of the Sumerian Empire, an empire which was formed by invading aliens called the Anunnaki. Sumer's original name was Ki-en-Gir, which means the land of the kings with blazing rockets. The Sumerian clay tablets describe the Anunnaki aliens genetically manipulating mankind and creating a hybrid race of alien reptilian humans who became known as the Nephilim. The Nephilim are also known as the Elohim in the Bible. This was a genetically created race of rulers which had their human DNA mixed with that of the invading Anunnaki aliens. References to this race of alien hybrid rulers can be found in ancient texts from around the planet. The Sumerian Empire was the place where Zoroastrian, Hindu, and Judaic religions all began. The ruling elite of ancient Egypt fashioned their bodies so that they resembled aliens. All over ancient Egypt, serpents, snakes, and reptiles are associated with kingship and power over the human population. New kings had their bodies massaged with a special potion which contained crocodile fat. This was a worldwide cult of the crocodile, a reptilian species which has kept its original form since before dinosaurs walked on land. The crocodile is pictured alongside the Wangina creator spirits of Western Australia. Reptiles have always been associated with a race of hidden masters. Many occult traditions which are related to the birth of Freemasonry speak of the hidden masters. Some occult historians and authors claim that a group of hidden masters control world international Freemasonry. Ancient Masonic texts suggest that these hidden masters are in actual fact alien spirits from another world. Some Masonic texts say that the secrets of how to control and influence society and politics from behind the scenes was passed to the elite of Freemasonry from a race of reptilian aliens who invaded planet Earth and landed in ancient Iraq more than 12,500 years ago. The archaeological record tells us that alien beings have invaded planet Earth many, many times. All over the United States, ancient oral traditions of sky gods or aliens persist. At conferences organized by American shamans, legends of aliens who gave mankind knowledge of genetics are spoken about openly. Shaman elders speak of beings from the stars called the Bacti, who invaded planet Earth before even dinosaurs existed. Right at the point when planet Earth was just forming. The Hopi shaman elders make little dolls which represent spirits of their elders and spirits of the Earth. They also make dolls which represent the spirits of the star gods. These dolls are called kachinas. According to shaman legends, the ancient Bacti genetically manipulated animals and created mankind. The Bacti aliens told early man that they were here to control the development of civilization, and that there were many other aliens who wanted to invade planet Earth. According to American shamans, the Bacti aliens have been known both as gods and devils throughout the evolution of man. Shamans teach that the Bacti are gods of the stars who have often destroyed evidence of man's real history in order to keep mankind ignorant and controllable. The oral traditions of the North American Indians teach us that the Bhakti star gods eventually lost control of planet Earth to another race of aliens, who were vicious reptiles with faces of dragons. The Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Egypt is dedicated to a deity who had dominion over our Milky Way galaxy. Scientists and astronomers now agree that there could be as many as 50,000 planets in our own Milky Way galaxy which can support intelligent life. On the ceiling of the temple, giant carvings depict star constellations, and on the walls, reptilian humanoid aliens are standing beside technological devices. Lizards can be clearly seen standing upright alongside the royal elite of ancient Egypt. Another common feature is the erectile serpent. This emblem is known as the Uranus. All the pharaohs wore cobra-shaped headdress featuring serpents and also vultures. All dinosaurs had reptilian genes. Contrary to what mainstream science teaches, all the dinosaurs did not die out in prehistoric times. They evolved into birds. Modern science has only just confirmed what the royal elite have known for thousands of years, that the reptilian genes of dinosaurs evolved into the various species of birds which we see to this day. Birds are actually avian reptiles, or feathered serpents. Birds share the same reptilian DNA as pterodactyls and biped raptor dinosaurs such as the Tyrannosaurus rex. Images of gods from the stars, symbolized by feathered serpents, can be found all over planet Earth. In ancient Mexico, there was a god-king known as Quetzalcoatl. The word Quetzal means bird, and Coatl means serpent. He was the god from the stars who brought civilization and knowledge of the cosmos to the people of Central America. Ancient texts from Yucatan, known as the Chilam Balam, tell us that the first inhabitants of the region were called the Chanas people, which means people of the serpent. They were ruled by a king called Itzamna. The word Itzam means lizard, and he is depicted as being half human and half serpent, just like the reptilian figures seen on the walls of the Temple of Hathor in Egypt. "5,000 years ago, the Olmecs of Central America carved statues of their god kings seated within the protective coils of giant serpents. In these carvings, we see gods holding small buckets, identical to the situlas of ancient Sumeria. These buckets contained the so-called water of life. the genetic material from which the reptilian overlords created modern man as a slave race to serve them. In North America, at Sago Canyon in Utah, we again see erectile serpents flanking star beings. This is the exact same iconography as we find at the Temple of Hathor in Egypt. This suggests that knowledge of a race of reptilian aliens was accepted as fact in the distant past right across planet Earth. Perhaps the most ancient of all Chinese texts is the mysterious Yi King, which describes how humans were genetically modified by a goddess known as Nu Kua. She was a reptilian, whose descendants became the emperors of China. Time and time again, we see rock carvings and ancient texts from all over planet Earth telling us that dragon-like reptilian humanoids invaded planet Earth and genetically created a race of hybrid alien human rulers. Many authors believe that the reptilian Anunnaki warriors of ancient Sumeria, who invaded the Caucasus Mountains, have secretly continued to control mankind via the worldwide network of secret societies which are loosely described as the Illuminati.